Hey guys, Rafi here from the Endgame Investor, and I'm really honored to have Peter Grandich on with me today. Hi, Peter. How are you doing? And thanks so much for finding me and seeking me out. It's really an honor to have you on my show.
Well, the pleasure, I'm certain, is going to be all mine. So you go right ahead.
From what I know about you, what really has you stand out is that you talk about God a lot, and you're a religious man. You're a man of God, and so am I. We're an investment community, or we're a monetary community, and we want to put in God to our message. And it's hard to do it. But the way I see it is that honest money, the only economic law in the Bible that we follow religiously is don't steal. And inflation, the way that this monetary system works is it's a system of theft. Whether you realize it or not, it's an ingenious system of theft, because what inflation basically is the government stealing your money but leaving the receipts in your bank account and then using your money for other stuff or loaning it to somebody else. And then you end up with all this debt, but all the money's gone, and then all the debt that you all the wealth that you think you have is actually nothing, and it ends up in a giant Tower of Babel that collapses at some point. And I feel that we're really near there. So how do you see the it's hard to even phrase this question. How do you see God or religion playing into this entire game here? Because I see it as very obvious. There's a big hole. Inflation is everywhere, not just in the money. Inflation is in education. Inflation is in every sector of society, in communication, in medicine. There's piles and piles of trash in every sector, and there are still kernels of truth that you can find, but you got to dig around, and it's a big trash bin. So inflation has poisoned us. How can God get us out of this?
Well, no matter what part of the book you read, you do bring up a good point that it is a book that for thousands of years has been the basis for how people have tried to live their lives, uh, especially regarding money. From the Christian standpoint, uh, there's more talk about matters of finance than there is about heaven or hell. And if you think about that, you would think that most people would realize, well, I think the end game is all that matters, right? Am I going to heaven or hell? But you're telling me there's more chatter about things regarding money, and I say yes. And in an extremely secular industry, I don't know if there's more of a secular industry than the finance world. I mean, I was told literally when this first started back in 2000, I went to the big firm we were working. I was with their compliance department. I told them what we wanted to do, and the guy basically said, "Hey, you could put a rock on the door, you could put a bull or a bear, but you ain't putting God's picture on your door." And leave that for Sundays. Was a kind of a line that I got and all. But for me, at least in the last half of a 40-year career, it became the basis to work from a foundation. But it is difficult. But one of the things that both Judaism and Christianity shares many things in common. One of them is that there's a good guy and there's a bad guy. And the bad guy has basically been worked out of the picture. Most people don't talk about it. Most people don't imagine it. And if they do, he's just a little red guy with a little fork in his hand. And you and I think, because I've read your work and all, we also know that there's little red guys working at the Federal Reserve and in various administrations around the world. And so there's good and bad in everything, and there's good and bad in financing. But there are some moral principles that I think those of us who do chant decide to stand on scripture. And you take your chances with that, in that there's only three ways people are going to look at you, and I'm certain this has happened to you. You're either a charlatan, you're just using this to benefit yourself. I don't care, just make me money kind of people. Or where you've been, I've been waiting to find someone like you that shares these commonalities and believe we need to put our faith uh, first. And for that, I found that I hope you would agree, even though I know where you're located, it's easier to sleep at night than it would be if I was doing the opposite of what those teachings were.
Yeah, yeah. It's in terms of, do I think that I'm doing the right thing? I never really doubted that as soon as I came to this conclusion. So in that sense, I sleep well at night, though, there's a war all around me, and I don't quite support the government here. And people who know me know that I don't. Though this is my country, so I can't leave, and this is my family, so I can't leave. But it's especially difficult being around a family that really, pisses you off and is not behaving well. But what can you do? They're your family. That's the problem. But yeah, what you said about encountering those three types of people, just make me money, or I'm a charlatan, or where have you been all my life? Actually, it's mostly been the last one. Where have you been? Because if you're looking for a religious guy who is talking about money and finance, then there aren't many. So when they
No.
find you, they stick to you. That's nice. But then it's like the duality of being a doomsday guy, but also fundamentally I'm an optimist. I find a hard time explaining that to people. They don't understand. I'm talking about the end of the world all the time, but I'm an optimist. Do you share that also? Because fundamentally, I know this is going to be over. I know all the inflation is going to go away. I know we're going to go back to the truth at some point. I just don't know what kind of stuff we're going to go through in the meantime. But I do know that the end game is a good game. It's good. Just how we get there is going to be trouble. How do you how do you see that happening when this all clears out? What is humanity going to look like? And do you think we're near that point? I mean, you've been through a lot more than I have. Is something different about the world now? Because to me, it seems completely insane. You were around in the 80s and 90s, you were in finance. I was just a baby and a kid. Is there something fundamentally different about these times than those decades?
For me, yes. I'm just about to celebrate 40 years in and around the financial arena, and I began the year with a podcast that said, I truly believe within 3 to 5 years tops, means it can happen sooner, but the more likely time span is somewhere between 3 and 5 years. The social, political, and economical upheaval here in the U.S. will rival, if not surpass, what we saw during the Great Depression. And again, I don't have any product or service that benefits from that type of advice given out to people, but a good part of that advice comes from the foundation of what I see happening from through my spiritual eyes. And the troubles that I see, different than why I say it'll be worse than the Great Depression, is at least in the Great Depression here in the US anyway, there was a moral fiber that held people together, and people were still much more helpful and willing to work with each other, even if they were on the other side of the political aisle. Now, here in the US, there's basically five things that I think set us up for this issue. The first and the biggest, and I know you talk about it, a lot, the insanity of the debt binge, which has now gone beyond an old movie which we used to be called Failsafe. There is no turning this around and getting away with an easy way or a mild way of fixing the issue of the amount of debt that's been acquired both on a government level, corporate level, and a consumer level. That's the first. The second is a retirement crisis. Why that's critical is 2/3 of Americans are working paycheck to paycheck, and they're never going to reach that nirvana that the commercials from the financial institutions show them what they have to look forward to. They too will also come a burden, so to speak, in that they'd be looking for government assistance to get through much tougher years at much older ages. The third, which is quickly moving up the rival number one for the US, and that's an immigration invasion that is happening here in the US. And what people have to stand in, I'm not here to talk about, well, there may be some bad people in here, terrorists. I'm talking that the lion's share are just very poor people that were whisked away and happily by the countries that they left, so not to burden them, coming to a place that offers, even from what they're getting now, far superior than what they were getting where they were. Who wouldn't want to walk a couple of thousand miles for that? And who isn't going to tell a bunch of friends back where they are, you should come too? But most of those, if all those people are coming just with the shirts on their back, so they're also going to be falling upon the needs of economics and social support here in the US. The fourth is the BRICS. I don't think Americans, and clearly the financial service community, gives it anything close to the respect and the necessity to understand of what's evolving there and how that's basically being set up for countries to eliminate dealing with the United States, not lessen, but basically not deal with them. And I don't think Americans realize the ramifications. And then the fifth, that you would hope that could fix any and all of these problems, the political paralysis we have now. We have two parties. Not only can they not even get in the same room with each other now, but there's members in each party who can no longer work with other members in the same party. And so one would expect that if any and all the issues I spoke of and others that I haven't come to be acute, you would hope there was a political will that could somehow fix it. And I don't believe it exists in the United States.
I don't I don't know if I don't think politics can save this. You know, every all thefts all thefts are eventually paid. You know, when the reason that you can't have society based on theft is because if you did, nobody would produce anything, and then you'd run out of things to steal. So, you know, going back to the Bible, that's why it says that you can't steal, because if you have a society based on theft, it collapses itself. And we've seen that with communism. It's not even that even communism wasn't a new thing. I mean, communism is the Tower of Babel society. You know, they were focused on one thing, one goal. That's the beginning verse of that story. Like the whole world was one language, and it says in Hebrew Dvarim Achadim, singular things, and that's how I see you know, things like Twitter or social media. You know, people zigging, zagging their eyes to one topic to another topic, being hyper focused on one thing, then hyper focused on another thing, like a cat tracking a mouse across the room, but nobody actually talking to each other. So that's the society that we're in now. I mean, it's and if we're going to talk about politics, you know, I don't usually talk about the Bible that much, but with you, I'll do it more. But at the collapse of the first Israelite society, right, there was one king, King Josiah Yoshiyahu, who led the people on this tremendous repentance campaign, right? And it was like one last spark of goodness, but even he couldn't change the society, and eventually it just fell apart anyway. So I mean, it could be important. It's not like we consider him a villain or irrelevant. It's important to have a good leader in the seat. But once the system itself is so rotten, there's no leader that can really save it, and you just got to bury it all, and then hopefully, you know, when it all falls apart, you have some green shoots left in whatever is left over. Maybe the regional states of America, or the 50 states will break up into 50 different political units, or even more of that by county, who knows, and then eventually start to build back together. And what I try to do with my commentary is not teach people how to trade gold. It's that I know this. I know that in the end, all of the goods and services in the world are all the real value in the world is going to funnel itself back into money, because money is by definition the most liquid commodity in the world. And the more good people that have real money right now, the better chances we have of good people rebuilding that society, because they'll have the money, they'll have the power, and then we can really build this whole thing back a lot better. I mean, I don't want to use a stupid political slogan, build back better. And that's not what I mean. But for just one example of that I saw that was really positive, and I wonder if you have any thoughts about this. The Javier Milei, the libertarian, who's now president of Argentina. He has both Christian and Jewish connections. I think he was born Catholic, but now he's interested in Judaism. Whatever the combination is, it's very, very interesting that kind of guy is in charge of Argentina, the most hyperinflated garbage country now. Maybe he can help rebuild it, but now he's in the World Economic Forum, and he's spreading libertarian messages. I don't think he's going to save anything, but he can start the messaging. So I'm into messaging, and I'm into reaching whoever is out there who understands what's going on in a basic sense, and honing it down and telling them to get the money now, because this thing is going down, and I want good people like you and me to have as much money as possible so we can communicate afterwards and build something back that makes a lot more sense than this.
And speaking of building back something that makes a lot more sense than this, these are the Miles Franklin weekly specials. First, we have a 1/10 ounce gold maple, 4-coin minimum while supplies last, only $32.50 over melt. Next, there is the 1/4 ounce gold maples, a 2-coin minimum while supplies last, only $59 over melt. And finally, we have the silver maple leaf coins, a 50-coin minimum while supplies last, only $3.75 over spot. If you're interested in any of these specials or anything that Miles Franklin has in stock, call 855-GAME-N, that's 855-436-3363, or email endgameinvestor@milesfranklin.com. And when we meet on the other side, we can all come together with our stacks and build something that makes a lot more sense than a systematic machine of theft.
Well, I'll tell you, you reminded me as you continue to speak there of a good movie that I've seen more than once called The Book of Eli. And in that movie, that's what it's basically about, that, there's this terrible war and a lot of people are lost, but this one man, who we didn't even realize to the end is blind, goes on a mission to deliver scripture, a Bible, and to a place where they're trying to start the world over again with the green shoots and so forth and so on. Wonderful movie. It had a lot to do with what you said. I don't normally get to the blood in the streets argument, because one of the things that I used to hear about, well, I own gold because when things get really, really bad and I'll be able to survive. And I always say to people, there's going to be people that don't own gold that survive also. And their main mission is going to be to find the people that still have the gold. And you won't be able to have enough gold or a big enough army to hold them off. I certainly don't want to get to that. I don't want to get to where I would have to feel that I need to build a survival tent, but I do think here we have set the stage economically, socially, and politically for a dire period that will last, I think, a generation or a lot longer than what we've been used to. We've only had these hiccups and bumps in 40 years of basically a markets that kept going up. And I don't think I can only speak for Americans. In my planning group, I still see 7 out of 10 families at different levels of income, including when I dealt with athletes, all live a lifestyle at least one level above their income. And until that changes, and until we no longer have every 3 miles public storage facilities where people are paying people to keep stuff there that they can't keep back in their big 4,000 a square, 5,000 square foot homes, I think it's a challenge. And I don't think there's any one answer. I know on one side, certain people think a certain person answer. On another side, they think it's a way of thinking. But I think that this issue is coming irregardless of who or what tries. Some may defer it or maybe lessen the blow, but the blow's coming.
Mhm. So about the public storage buildings, is that just a hoarding disease that people have too much stuff and not enough space? Like what does this mean?
It's really, if you think about it, my parents and grandparents, I think I was in like a 700 square foot apartment growing up in the Bronx in New York. And whatever my parents owned, they had one TV, they had one car, they didn't have a bunch of stuff. That's not the case for the American family now, in much bigger dwellings. And there's really been, both Wall Street and Madison Avenue is guilty of this. And it's decades, and it was long before there was the internet, but the internet has excelled it, is that people watch fantasies. They see what the world is telling them what life is like, or these groups are living and all. And to get it, money and stuff is the answer. And whatever you got to do to get it almost. And with that, all these people have bought a lot of stuff and then end up having to store it somewhere, even though they have much bigger homes than our parents and grandparents have. And there's nothing wrong with the public storage companies. They're just providing a service, but it is this philosophy that more stuff equals more happiness. And that's generated out of between Wall Street and the advertising community, which, Madison Avenue was famous for.
How do you think a monetary system should be structured? I know it's a broad question, but if the ill, I think the ill of this entire system is the way that money works. I mean, originally it was gold and silver. I still think it is gold and silver because all these derivatives are really just derivatives on top of gold and silver, and that's really my main point in my philosophy. Like, there's no such thing really as a fiat currency. There's just layers and layers and layers of derivatives on top of the real money, which originally was gold and silver. And I'm not saying there's anything like special or spiritual about gold and silver itself. It just happens to be the most liquid commodity that can be used as money. And then just like price controls can't be successful, right? You can't just declare the price of any good or service. It has to be determined in the market. That's why a fiat currency is not really possible. It can look like a fiat currency, but really, when my argument is that when the exchange rate between gold and the dollar, or between silver and the dollar, it goes to infinity, that is basically hyperinflation. And we see that in every country, that there is hyperinflation. What happens is that you can no longer exchange the paper or the digits or whatever it is for real money, and that means the money is dead. Right? We still have an exchange rate with gold. It's about 1 to 2050 or 1 to 2040 or whatever it is. So that's where my thinking is. Where do you come in on that? And what is the best monetary system in your view? How should it work?
Well, it worked fairly well when we had a gold standard because it brought in some fiscal responsibility. It's not a coincidence that deficits and debt skyrocketed when the gold standard was removed. And so whatever has to come about, there needs to be some responsibility of not creating money that you really don't have. Now, some people, we say we got to go back to the gold standard. I don't know that. My mind can't think that many zeros to how much real paper is out there and how much gold that would need and what would the price of the gold have to be. I do know this. I do know, as history has shown, no one currency ever remains the main world currency, and the dollar's days are numbered, and the BRIC nations desire, especially key countries there, to acquire large sums of gold are not for speculation, are not for trade, but eventually in some manner, which I don't know what it is, or I don't believe I'm capable of my mindset to develop it for them, but I suspect that they are going to use that in some manner to demonstrate that whatever they use for trading, either just among themselves or they decide to go with an alternative to the dollar as a world reserve currency or something in between, that it has legitimacy behind it and something that that money could be turned in for versus the full faith and credit of the United States, which it says in our dollar bill, which isn't worth the paper it's printed on right now.
Yeah, it's not even printed on paper anymore. It's just printed on digits. You're talking about an era. You said 3 to 5 years. I'm not exactly sure when you said that, but soon. Let's just say soon, within both of our lifetimes, please God, that we both live long lives, to 120. That's the Jewish saying. Uh, at some point, this entire debt pyramid is going to collapse. Are you worried at that point that the globalist organizations, the World Economic Forum, the World Bank, the Bank of International, whoever they are, I don't know, the bad people, are you afraid of them taking over at that point? Because personally, I'm not, because they are also dependent on the inflationary system. When it falls, they can't print money either. They can't benefit from debt either, and so they go away also. What's your view on that? Are you in that sense rooting for the end of this, or are you wary about it because you're worried about the globalist organizations taking over and, I don't know, enforcing lockdowns and vaccine passports or whatever they want to do?
If everything was equal when I was 20 years younger, I'd probably be much more worried. But because I feel I'm well advanced in my life and I appreciate that 120, but given what I'm seeing in this 55 and over community I live, where people are struggling to get by when they're 80, I don't know if 120 is going to be a good number to be at, and it'd be quite expensive, I think, medically to say that. But what I do see this is that, and again, I can only speak to U.S. terms. While a handful of people have moved up the ladder and some to the real elite level, the vast majority of Americans in the last few decades at best went sideways and in most cases went backwards. And more people are falling down on that level. You just have to look at places like food banks where it's double or triple the number of people now coming there, and people of working class and of fairly means working classes. The average American not only is working paycheck to paycheck, but doesn't even have $1,000 saved for emergencies and all. That's why when we had the fraud of all frauds, the COVID, within a few weeks, we had to create trillions of dollars because all these people were really couldn't keep going. They didn't have any survivability financial wise and all. I think that was a great indication of if things really get bad, how bad it can get. And so I don't know of, I don't have, I know they're very powerful as humans, and you know what these groups can do, and the Soroses and all these others. But for me personally, to answer to you is, as long as they can't steal my soul, which they can't, then I'm okay. If the point gets to the point that somehow they've managed to steal my soul, and no matter what I do, I can't go in a certain direction, then I'd be mad.
Well, that's pretty much what they tried to do in COVID, and I think they stole a lot of people's souls during COVID because it really turned off the thinking mind of so many people. I mean, for me, that was really a wake up call. I've said this on different interviews that I've had different wake ups. I've woken up from this nightmare in different layers. 2008 was the first layer. I was like, wait a second, this doesn't make sense. But then I kind of went back to sleep a little bit. I was like, okay, I'll deal with that later. And then with 2012, with Ron Paul's campaign, that got me on the road to libertarianism and to understanding the monetary system. And then 2020 was something else, because from about 2012 to 2020, I was like, oh, well, the end game's going to happen in my brain. It was like, rainbows and unicorns after this is all done. And I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I didn't have any like nightmarish scenarios that were sticking in my head. I knew it was going to be bad, but I didn't really quite understand it. And then COVID happened, and I'm like, wow, like I knew the end was coming, but I didn't know it was going to be so stupid. Uh, but it was, and I got through that. My faith really helped me get through that. And I fought hard. I fought very, very hard. How did you get through it? Just the incredible stupidity of everyone and how they were acting, and just that people were acting sort of like jackbooted thugs, and there were discussions of opening up. I wouldn't call them concentration camps, but quarantine camps that could have ended up that way. I mean, I grew up with Holocaust education, and I saw the same patterns here, and I kept yelling them out to my people, and they were like, "What are you talking about? You're crazy." So how did you get through this?
Well, our faith, and also we felt right away that it wasn't the severity that they were letting us wanting us to believe it was. We also felt that when it took years to develop any drugs that were worthwhile, something made in 6 or 9 months, you might want to be cautious about it. So that was probably one of our lead reasons why we didn't want to take it. We were blessed. There were many people here forced to take these because their life depended on it, their jobs, their careers. And of course, now we're witnessing a lot of issues regarding those. But again, we just prayed that we would get through it. As prayerful and as I am, and I don't know in your family, my wife is the stronger believer than me. She is truly, everything is trusting in God. Me, yeah, today it is, but maybe not tomorrow. But she is, and she was really the backbone that helped get me through it and my daughter through it.
Yeah, well, for me, it was my wife also. And faith goes in and out. Sometimes you're feeling it, sometimes you're not. But in your mind, at least in my mind, I know that I didn't put myself here, and I didn't put myself in this time. But I'm here to spread a message, and that's what I'm trying to do. And I think that's what you're trying to do too. So, talking about spreading messages, I mean, what do you're mostly retired now, yeah? So, what do you want? What do you want people to know? What message do you want people that understand a little bit about the problems? What do you want them to do?
Well, it's interesting you say that. I have a few years left in me. I'm still part of a financial planning group here that just works with U.S. residents. But as I said in my New Year's podcast, and I know a lot of people are not going to come because of what it said, I really feel that I've been given 40 years to see things and share things, that there's some really, really, really tough times coming. And a lot of people aren't prepared for it. And I can only imagine, and I always say this and love to hear your comments. I'm certain Noah must have been working on that. It's sunny out there laughing at him. Hey, Noah, what do you mean it's going to rain? It's beautiful out. And that's kind of the attitude I get from people now, especially the professional community. I get more taunts or ribs or unsolicited emails saying you're a jerk, not from individuals, but from others in the financial service community. And it just bodes well for me to know that I'm in the right track because most people in the financial service industry can't even read a balance sheet, don't understand like you and I do how money's made, how it plays a role, but they're very, very good in selling the idea of investments. So I would just say that in what time I have remaining, that this is a time of need to be extremely cautious. Less is more is a motto of mine, and it's better to be a live chicken than a dead duck.
Well, comments on Noah. So, back to the 120 quip that I gave you. No, no, Noah. This is an explicit verse in the story that God was giving them 120 years to turn around. So it took Noah 120 years to build that ark, and they were laughing at him. That's very clear in the rabbinic literature. They were laughing at him day in, day out. He kept doing it. And interesting about that story is in terms of turning it to contemporary discussions and wokeism. There's one of these books in the back here. It's covered, but the Abarbanel. He's a rabbi from 15th century Spain. So he noticed that in the story of Noah, it keeps repeating Shnaim ish v'ishto, Shnaim ish v'ishto. When he's putting two animals, the pairs of animals on the ark, it says his man and wife, man and wife, man and wife. So why does he keep saying that over and over and over again? He says because one of the biggest problems in that society was they denied that there were men and women. They denied there were boys and girls, and like everyone was just sleeping with everyone, and nobody cared about reproduction. Animal with man, man with animal, and it was just a mess. So I don't know if we've gotten that bad, but we're on the stage of doubting that there are men and women now. So on that sense, I think we're close to the end here, and we've got to flush it out.
Oh, that's a very good point. You're absolutely right. That is what we're seeing now, and it's just ripping apart everything that what God created man and woman for, and to speak about it against that is causing issues for those that want to stand up. So you're right. We're well into this issue.
Yeah. Well, on that doomsday note, I am an optimist. Everything will be fine in the end. I don't know how we're going to get there, but I think from your tone that you agree with me, it'll be okay. We just got to get our families through it and through the other side, and the other side will be better.
Please, God.
Yes, please God, indeed. Thanks so much for coming on. You can come back anytime. I really enjoy speaking with you. And everybody stay safe out there and pray.
Peace be with you.
If you're interested in any of these specials or anything that Miles Franklin has in stock, call 855-GAME-END. That's 855-436-3363 or email endgameinvestor@milesfranklin.com.